I'd like now to move to a presentation by CNSC staff as outlined in CMD 15H5 and H5.A. I understand that Dr. Newland will make the presentation. Over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. President, members of the Commission. My name is David Newland, and I am the Acting Director General of the Directorate of Nuclear Cycle and Facilities Regulation. With me today is Mr. Michael Rinker, Director of the Nuclear Processing Facilities Division. We also have licensing and compliance staff as well as subject matter experts with us to help answer any questions that the Commission members may have. We are here today to present Commission Member Document CMD 15M5 entitled A License Renewal SRB Technologies Canada Incorporated. I will now pass the presentation to Mr. Michael Rinker. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. President and members of the Commission. My name is Michael Rinker, and I am the Director of the Nuclear Processing Facilities Division at the CNSC. The purpose of this presentation is to provide CNSC staff recommendations on the license application from SRB Technologies. From SRB Technologies Canada Incorporated, or SRB, for renewal of its nuclear processing facility operating license. To support the CNSC staff recommendation, I will present highlights of the CNSC regulatory oversight of this facility, the performance of the facility over its license term, areas of regulatory focus and other matters of regulatory interest. And finally, I will present the CNSC staff recommendations to the Commission on this licensing matter. SRB is a gaseous tritium light source manufacturing facility located in Pembroke, Ontario. SRB leases a space in an industrial building similar in size and appearance to a strip mall that is located on the outskirts of Pembroke. As you have just heard, SRB manufactures several types of radiation devices for military and aerospace applications. SRB also manufactures emergency lighting devices such as exit signs, safety markers, and safety signs that are found in public places. The devices are commonly used for emergency lighting where the use of conventional electrical lighting is unavailable or impractical. The current SRB Nuclear Substance Processing Facility operating license expires on June 30th, 2015. SRB has requested a 10-year license. No new activities are proposed that are not currently authorized under the current license. SRB has requested to increase the footprint of the facility by 180 square meters to accommodate the storage of non-radiological materials. This slide provides a timeline of licensing actions related to the SRB facility. In 1990, Saunders Roe Canada Incorporated, now SRB, was issued a radioisotope license by the Atomic Energy Control Board to produce tritium-filled glass tubes for use in self-luminous emergency exit signs. As a result of the Nuclear Safety and Control Act coming into effect in 2000, SRB was issued a Class 1B Nuclear Substance Processing Facility operating license for the same activities it had conducted in the 1990s. This licensing action was accompanied by an environmental assessment that concluded the resulting dose to workers and members of the public would be minor, and the environment and the health of Canadian citizens would be protected. However, the report identified the requirement for an environmental monitoring program. In 2005, SRB was issued a 1-year license with restricted conditions due to SRB's failure to control releases of tritium that resulted in groundwater contamination. In 2006, SRB applied for the renewal of its operating license. However, the Commission was not satisfied that SRB could continue to operate due to its tritium releases and resultant groundwater contamination. As such, SRB was not permitted to process tritium. From 2006 to 2008, SRB undertook several steps to mitigate its tritium emissions and protect the groundwater resource. These mitigation measures including the replacement of oil pumps with pumps that do not use oil, changes to tritium handling practices, and retrofitting the filling rigs. In 2007, This SRB license was amended to allow SRB to assemble signs using light sources manufactured elsewhere. At that time, the Commission requested CNSC staff to initiate research studies on tritium releases in Canada. In response, the CNSC staff undertook several research projects under the banner of the Tritium Studies Project. In 2008, SRB applied to the CNSC to amend its license to resume processing of tritium for a period of 2 years. The Commission concluded that SRB had made major improvements to its qualifications and performance in the area of environmental protection. Consequently, SRB was issued a 2-year nuclear substance process facility operating license. Between 2008 and 2010, CNSC staff conducted tritium studies under the banner of the Tritium Studies Project. The project resulted in 7 CNSC publications that are now available on the CNSC website. In 2010, SRB's operating license was renewed for a period of 5 years. At the time of renewal, CNSC staff provided additional information on groundwater, detailing the trend in tritium concentrations in residential wells, CNSC staff's assessment of the movement of tritium in groundwater, and CNSC staff's conclusions. The graph on this slide shows the amount of tritium that was released from SRB since the year 2000. Releases in 2000 were near 18,000 terabecquerels per year and decreased to less than 100 terabecquerels per year when operations ceased after CNSC regulatory action. Improvements to facility design and operations, together with an improved safety culture at SRB, have kept releases below 100 terabecquerels after operations recommenced in 2008. The blue insert is an expanded view that better illustrates the low releases since 2008 and during the current licensing period. Tritium releases from the SRB facility to the environment occur by way of stack releases. Tritium is not released directly to groundwater. Tritium, because of its association with water, is deposited on the ground surface as moisture or rainfall. Tritium then migrates through the soil to the underlying groundwater table, while releases to the atmosphere and deposition on the ground surface can occur relatively quickly. The migration of tritium from the ground surface to the underlying groundwater takes approximately 5 to 8 years near the SRB facility. This is an important distinction for impacts to groundwater. And this understanding of tritium behavior in the environment is the basis for a restriction on the SRB facility to stop operations during rainfall events. This figure provides the most recent average annual groundwater monitoring data near the SRB facility. As expected, the highest tritium levels in groundwater occur adjacent to the stack at SRB. The groundwater flow direction is towards Muskrat River. However, groundwater flows very slowly in this area, on the area of a few meters per year, and Muskrat River is approximately 400 meters from the SRB facility. The concentration pattern observed in this slide is reflective of the aerial deposition pattern and not the migration of a plume. That means that values in Muskrat River are not expected to increase from what is observed today. The river is protected and will remain protected. Tritium values in wells located in the nearby residential area are near or below 200 becquerels per liter. These values are well below the provincial drinking water standard of 7,000 becquerels per liter. Moreover, these residences are connected to the municipal water supply whose intake is from the Ottawa River. Monitoring data from the Ottawa River are near the detectable limit of tritium of 5 becquerels per liter. During SRB's last license renewal application in 2010, the Commission, as well as CNSC staff, were concerned about the apparent increasing trend of tritium concentrations at monitoring well MW6-10 under the SRB stacks. CNSC staff were paying serious attention to the matter and conducted groundwater modeling to gain some knowledge as to whether the increasing trend would continue, and if yes, for how long. CNSC staff also wanted to independently verify the licensee's conclusion that the high tritium concentrations in the soil were due to historic practice and not related to current emissions. CNSC staff used modeling to help provide the Commission with information for the regulatory decision making. The modeling results for tritium concentrations at groundwater monitoring wells at this SRB site predict the concentration trends and is based on average hydrological and hydrogeological parameters using soil moisture data obtained in 2006. The modeling gave staff confidence that at the time of the work in 2010, the tritium concentrations were caused by high tritium concentrations in the soil due to previous year's inventory, and that tritium concentrations in this monitoring well would continue to increase for a short period of time, and then they would eventually start to decline. In the plot, additional measured data from 2010 to 2014 were added to the 2010 prediction. From this plot, one can see that although there is high variation in the measured data, they do support the predicted trend to provide further evidence to confirm CNSC's understanding of the behavior of tritium in the groundwater. The data plotted on these graphs provide additional evidence that groundwater conditions near the SRB facility continue to recover after relatively high concentrations that were observed previously at this facility. The figure on the left is a monitoring well that is located adjacent to the SRB facility. This well is for monitoring. It is capped and locked and is not accessible for drinking. Concentrations in this monitoring well exceeded 100,000 becquerels per liter in 2007, but have since declined to below the provincial drinking water standard of 7,000 becquerels per liter. The figure on the right is a well located at a business located adjacent to SRB. The tritium concentrations exhibited an increasing trend, followed by a long and steady declining trend. This observation is also reflective of high concentrations of tritium in the soil profile when emissions were high, followed by a period of recovery or improvement now that SRB has greatly reduced its releases to air. In January 2007, the Commission directed CNSC staff to initiate research studies on tritium releases in Canada and to study and evaluate tritium processing facilities exercising the best practices around the globe. In response, the CNSC has undertaken several research projects under the banner of the Tritium Studies Project. The purpose of this research was to enhance the information used in the regulatory oversight of tritium processing and tritium releases in Canada. The research included a review of tritium in drinking water, the environmental fate of tritium in the atmosphere, soil, and in vegetation and garden produce, and the studies included the environment around the SRB facility here in Pembroke. Tritium from nuclear facilities is released as HT, a gas, or HTO, which is tritiated water. The tritiated water is deposited on soil, a portion of which is converted to organically bound tritium, or OBT. The models used to predict tritium concentrations in local produce tend to over-predict total tritiated water, but have under-predicted the proportion of organically bound tritium. This has been taken into account in the calculation of public dose, resulting from the release of tritium by using directly locally measured HTO and OBT in public dose calculations. It was determined that the contribution of tritium to the public dose in Pembroke, as well as near other nuclear facilities in Canada, is very low. The CNSC staff has also studied the health consequences of tritium near nuclear facilities in Canada. The results of laboratory studies demonstrate that detrimental health effects could only occur if doses were much higher, 1 million times higher, than doses the public would receive from Canada's nuclear facilities. Epidemiological studies examined 42,000 Canadian nuclear workers and found no evidence of health risk from tritium exposure. These same studies have shown that public doses resulting from Ontario nuclear facilities are 100 to 1,000 times lower than typical natural background radiation. And finally, this work also demonstrated that there is no evidence of childhood leukemia clusters near nuclear facilities in Canada. In summary, the environment and the health of Canadians is protected through the CNSC's regulatory oversight from facilities that release tritium. I would now like to focus this presentation on today's application for the renewal of the SRB operating license. Licensing considerations were based on CNSC staff's review of the license application and the information submitted to support the application. In addition, CNSC staff assessed SRB's past performance and its compliance with the regulatory requirements of 13 safety and control areas and other matters of regulatory interest. A summary of this assessment is provided in the following slides. In general, SRB's compliance record over the past 5 years has demonstrated a commitment to safety and to transparency. CNSC staff are recommending the removal of the safeguards license condition from SRB's new license because the existing license condition is redundant with Section 12.1.1 of the General Nuclear Safety and Control Regulations, which states that every licensee shall take all necessary measures to facilitate Canada's compliance with any applicable safeguards agreement. For licensees with small inventories of low significant materials, the General Nuclear Safety and Control Regulations alone is considered sufficient. For SRB, this regulatory requirement applies to a quantity of depleted uranium that is used in SRB's process. All shipments of tritium to international destinations or a receipt of tritium from an international destination must be authorized by the CNSC through the issuance of a separate license under the CNSC's Nuclear Non-Proliferation Import-Export Regulations. The proposed removal of the safeguards license condition will not alter in any way the non-proliferation obligations on SRB in regards to tritium, which are derived from the CNSC regulations. Lastly, I wish to take this opportunity to clarify the status of tritium with respect to IAEA safeguards agreements. As per the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons and the Canada IAEA Safeguards Agreement, IAEA safeguards cover uranium, thorium, and polonium-239, which are materials which could be directly or indirectly used to make a nuclear weapon. While tritium can increase the yield of a nuclear explosion and is thus covered by the CNSC's Nuclear Non-Proliferation Import-Export Regulations, it cannot generate a nuclear explosion on its own and so is not under IAEA safeguards. I would like to make a correction with regards to CNSC staff request for delegation of authority. In CMD 15H5, we have requested that the Commission accept the delegation of authority to CNSC staff as outlined in the proposed License Condition Handbook. Staff are rescinding this request as there are no hold points in the proposed license, and any changes to the facility outside of the licensing basis would require Commission approval. The License Condition Handbook will be modified to reflect this change before it would be issued to the SRB should the Commission decide to renew the license. SRB is currently regulated by the CNSC with a Class 1B nuclear substance processing facility operating license that was issued pursuant to the Nuclear and Safety and Control Act. In general, after the Commission grants a license, the role of CNSC staff is to provide the regulatory oversight in order to ensure that SRB is operating its facility in a safe manner in compliance with the Nuclear Safety and Control Act, its regulations, SRB's operating license that authorizes its activities, and SRB's programs that are used to meet the regulatory requirements. To ensure the facility operates safely, CNSC staff apply a risk-informed approach to the compliance oversight of the SRB facility. The level of risk at this facility is considered in the development of compliance verification program and the frequency at which safety and control areas are inspected. As part of the compliance oversight, CNSC staff perform inspections, desktop reviews of SRB's programs and procedures, event reviews, and reviews of annual compliance monitoring and operational performance reporting. Performance at each safety and control area is continually assessed by CNSC staff and reported annually in CNSC staff annual reports to the Commission. CNSC staff ensure that SRB staff are qualified to perform their work, that the facility and equipment is maintained and updated if necessary to respond to lessons learned from operating experience. CNSC staff track all identified non-compliance to resolution. Any risk significant issues are brought in front of the Commission as per the event initial report process. SRB is responsible for ensuring the safe operation of its facility, whereas CNSC staff independently verify SRB's performance. CNSC staff conducted several site visits with SRB during this licensing period. Typically, CNSC staff conduct these visits to observe the conditions at the facility, to introduce updated standards, or clarify expectations with licensee's management and staff. For example, in 2014, staff visited SRB to discuss topics such as the 2015 relicensing activities, implementation of updated personal training regulatory requirements, and Canadian Standards Association management system requirements for nuclear facilities. In addition, using a risk-informed regulatory approach, staff performed a minimum of 1 inspection per year at SRB. Because of the low level of complexity of the SRB facility, it is possible to inspect several safety and control areas during a single inspection. The compliance verification activities, therefore, include standard checks of SRB's program in all 13 safety and control areas. Licensees are required to submit a report within 20 days of a reportable event. CNSC staff perform desktop reviews of these reports and ensure adequate corrective measures have been implemented to prevent a recurrence of a similar event. SRB had no reportable events during this licensing period. Enforcement actions are a part of the normal ongoing compliance processes used by CNSC staff. The enforcement tools available to CNSC staff include orders, directives, action notices, and administrative monetary penalties. During the current licensing period, staff issued 12 action notices to SRB. There are no open enforcement actions with SRB at this time. All were closed to the satisfaction of CNSC staff. To date, SRB has addressed all CNSC staff requests requiring no escalation of enforcement actions during the licensing period. Findings of these inspections identified areas for improvement as opposed to regulatory non-compliances. None of the identified inspection findings during the licensing period posed an immediate or unreasonable risk to the health and safety of persons or the environment. Rather, the findings were required to be addressed for better alignment to SRB's own programs and for continual improvement. Performance in all safety and control areas has remained satisfactory to fully satisfactory during the current licensing period. SRB staff have the expertise and qualifications to safely carry on the activities authorized by the license. No worker or member of the public received a dose in excess of the regulatory dose limits, and all radiological releases were well below regulatory limits. An environmental assessment under the Nuclear and Safety Control Act and its regulations was conducted for this application. CNSC staff conclude that SRB will make adequate provision for the protection of the environment. Only one lost time incident occurred during the licensing period. SRB's programs were implemented and maintained effectively in accordance with its own operational requirements and license requirements. This slide provides a summary of SRB's ratings over the current 5-year licensing period for 13 safety and control areas. Overall, the safety and control areas range from satisfactory to fully satisfactory. The safety and control area, conventional health and safety, was rated fully satisfactory in 2013 and 2014 as a result of its consistent record of worker protection. In 2014, CNSC staff rated SRB's Fitness for Service program as fully satisfactory as a result of several improvements to its manufacturing process, equipment, and revision of its maintenance program in 2014. These improvements proactively incorporated best industry practice. SRB has implemented and maintained an effective radiation protection program as required by the radiation protection regulations. All workers at SRB have been designated as nuclear energy workers in accordance with the radiation protection regulations. Radiation exposures are monitored to ensure compliance with the CNSC's regulatory dose limits and with keeping doses as low as reasonably achievable. Throughout the current licensing period, no workers' radiation exposures reported by SRB exceeded the CNSC regulatory dose limits. The maximum effective dose by a worker in the current licensing period was 1.93 millisieverts, or approximately 4% of the regulatory limit of 50 millisieverts in a one-year dosimetry period. The yearly variation of SRB staff's radiation exposure is directly correlated with three primary factors: the level of tritium processing, the types of light sources being manufactured, and the results of ALARA-driven improvements to manufacturing processes, equipment, and programs. CNSC staff are satisfied that doses to workers are being controlled well below the regulatory limits and are maintained as low as reasonably achievable. Public dose resulting from the SRB facility is based on environmental monitoring results. The maximum dose to a member of the public as a result of the emissions from SRB over the term of the license have been less than 0.007 millisieverts. This is 0.7% of the annual public dose limit. The increase in calculated maximum annual effective dose to a member of the public from 0.004 millisieverts to 0.007 millisieverts observed in 2012 and 13 is attributed to approximately threefold increase in tritium processing during the same period, from approximately 10,000 terabecquerels in 2012 to 30,000 becquerels in 2013. Based on the review of the dose data, CNSC staff are satisfied that SRB is adequately controlling radiation doses to members of the public to levels well below regulatory limits. A key performance measure of the conventional health and safety is the number of lost time injuries that occur per year. A lost time injury is an injury that takes place at work and results in the worker being unable to return to work and carry out their duties for a period of time. During the licensing period, SRB continues to demonstrate its ability to keep workers safe from occupational injuries while tritium processing increased, and as a result, SRB increased its staff from 15 to 43 employees to meet their production demands. Only a single lost time injury occurred during the current licensing term as a result of an injury that occurred during the machining process in a zone where no tritium is handled or processed. As seen in this table, SRB's releases to the atmosphere continue to be effectively controlled and are consistently well below the release limits prescribed in its operating license. The release limits are based on environmental protection and ensure sustainable use of groundwater resources, as well as consideration of public dose implications. The release limits for SRB are much lower than would be required to protect the public, so that groundwater as a resource can also be protected. There were no license limit exceedances during the current licensing period. However, during the period of October 28th to November 4th, 2014, there was a gaseous tritium action level exceedance of the weekly action level for tritium. The release represented 3.7% of the annual release limit for total tritium. SRB conducted an investigation into this exceedance to identify the contributing cause and root cause. SRB's investigation concluded that the higher tritium emissions were related to a leak in a gaseous tritium light source and a second leak in a manifold gauge. CNSC staff reviewed SRB's investigation report and corrective actions and found both to be acceptable. SRB continues to effectively control tritium releases to air from their facility and are well below license limits. The monitoring data for releases to the sewer system from 2010 through 2014 are shown in this table. The data shows that liquid effluent from the facility continues to be effectively controlled and that tritium releases are well below the license limit. The IAEA has published IAEA Tech Doc 1000 titled Clearance of Materials Resulting from the Use of Radionuclides in Medicine Industry and Research. This document provides a method for calculating permissible releases to sewer systems that would ensure that municipal workers are protected if all the tritium remains in the sewage sludge and if all the tritium is released to a small river system. The CNSC has selected 20% of the level that is determined from this international approach as the license limit, and SRB has been releasing tritium at much lower values relative to the license limit. SRB continues to effectively control both releases to air and releases to the sewer system, and all releases remain well below license limits. SRB has a very good safety record. There are currently no safety concerns, and from CNSC staff perspective, no impediments to renew the operating license. Nevertheless, CNSC staff have regulatory focus areas which stem from Commission's direction, from operational experience, and or new research findings. The two main focus areas for this license renewal are, first, the implementation of updated standards and regulatory documents, and second, environmental monitoring. These are described in more detail in the following slides. SRB is working in these areas for continuous safety improvement, which is an integral part of the CNSC regulatory framework. This table shows 8 updated CSA standards and regulatory documents that are proposed for inclusion in the License Condition Handbook. The implementation dates are listed on this slide. SRB submitted to CNSC staff a revised training program in January 2015 that meets the requirements of the Personal Training Regulatory Document 2-2.2.2. CNSC staff will continue to monitor the implementation and effectiveness of this updated program. In addition, CNSC staff will continue to update the Commission on the progress of these continuing improvement activities via the annual regulatory oversight report on uranium and nuclear processing facilities. During the licensing period, tritium processing at SRB ranged from 6,644 terabecquerels in 2010 to a maximum of 30,543 terabecquerels in 2013. However, releases of tritium to air relative to the amount of tritium processed reached their lowest point in 2014 after 3 consecutive annual reductions. CNSC staff attribute this decrease in relative emissions to the tritium reduction initiatives undertaken by SRB during the licensing period. Despite the production increase, SRB's environmental limits found in the proposed License Condition Handbook will remain the same as in the current license. CNSC staff have verified through their compliance activities that SRB has adequate operational controls to provide assurance that the release limits stipulated in the operation license would not be exceeded. SRB monitors 46 groundwater wells around the SRB facility. Since renewal of the license in 2010, SRB has conducted a groundwater study which confirmed that the residential wells with the highest tritium concentration of 226 becquerels per liter in 2013 and the Muskrat River with tritium concentrations for the last 2 years in the range of 3 to 22 becquerels per liter are not at risk of exceeding the Ontario drinking water quality standard of 7,000 becquerels per liter. The highest tritium concentration in a potential drinking water well was found in Business Well B2, averaging 1,238 becquerels per liter in 2014. SRB continues to provide bottled drinking water to the business, even though the tritium concentrations are well below the Ontario drinking water standard. CNSC staff independent analysis of SRB's groundwater monitoring results are further discussed in the Environmental Assessment Information Report found in Addendum E of CMD 15-H5. Overall, CNSC staff conclude that the tritium inventory in the groundwater system around the facility has been stabilizing and improving as expected. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission conducts environmental assessments under the Nuclear and Safety and Control Act for all projects in accordance with its mandate to ensure the protection of the environment and the health of people. As found in Appendix E of CMD 15-H5, CNSC staff prepared an information report based on the environmental assessment review completed for the license renewal application submitted by SRB. As a result of the environmental assessment review, CNSC staff conclude that SRB has and will continue to make adequate provision for the protection of the environment and the health and safety of persons. CNSC staff launched an environmental monitoring program for SRB. CNSC staff independently monitored results to confirm that the public and the environment around SRB are safe. These results The results of the Independent Environmental Monitoring Program are consistent with the results submitted by SRB, confirming that the licensee's environmental protection program protects the health and safety of people and the environment in the vicinity of the SRB facility, and that there are no health impacts. These results are published on the CNSC's website and demonstrate continuous improvement efforts of both SRB and the CNSC's ability to communicate its regulatory oversight. In 2013, as requested by the Commission, CNSC staff measured the concentrations of tritium in sewage sludge in various municipalities in Ontario, 11 in total. This request was in response to concerns raised in 2011 by members of the public during the Commission's meeting for SRB's annual status report on the safety performance of the facility. The tritium concentrations in sewage sludge and liquid effluent were below the analytical detection limit for all wastewater treatment plants sampled, except for those in Peterborough and in Pembroke. Using the finding from Pembroke wastewater treatment plant, the doses of radiation from the measured concentration of tritium in sewage sludge were calculated for 2 representative persons: a worker at the wastewater treatment plant involved in sewage sludge loading, and a worker at a municipal landfill who was involved in applying landfill cover to waste. The estimated annual effective doses were 10,000 to 5 million times below the regulatory annual public dose limit of 1 millisievert, well below doses known to cause health effects. The dose from tritium in sewage sludge also represents a small fraction of the natural background radiation. As a result, the report concludes that there is no impact on public health and supports the license limit for SRB's releases to the sewer as being very protective. The CNSC ensures that all of its license decisions under the Nuclear Safety Control Act uphold the honor of the Crown and consider Aboriginal people's potential or established Aboriginal and/or treaty rights pursuant to Section 35 of the Constitution Act, 1982. Aboriginal groups who previously expressed interest in being kept informed of CNSC licensed activities occurring in their traditional territories were sent letters in December of 2014 providing them with information regarding the license renewal application, the opportunity to apply for participant funding, and details regarding the Commission's public hearing. Follow-up phone calls were conducted to ensure that they had received the letters and to answer any questions. To date, CNSC staff have not been made aware of any concerns related to the license renewal from the identified First Nation and Métis group. At renewal in 2010, the Commission exempted SRB from the cost recovery fee regulations. The exemption was temporary and conditional upon the payment of the fees as per the schedule stipulated under License Condition 16.1 of the current operating license. SRB complied with the repayment schedule stipulated in the current license. The final payment and total cost adjustments were paid September 25, 2013. SRB is now in good standing with respect to cost recovery fee regulation requirements. As a financial guarantee instrument, SRB proposes to continue to use a revised escrow agreement and a revised security and access agreement, providing CNSC access to the funds. SRB proposes to fund the increase of $102,012 from the previous cost estimate of $550,476 by making 6 equal installments of $17,002 to the escrow account over a 3-year period. CNSC staff conclude that SRB's financial guarantee meets the applicable regulatory requirements under the Nuclear Safety Control Act. SRB's Public Information and Disclosure Program meets all requirements and intentions outlined in the regulatory document 99.3, Public Information and Disclosure. SRB has taken several improvements to its program, demonstrating a commitment to establish an atmosphere of openness and transparency regarding the health and safety of the public and the environment as it relates to its licensed activities. The CNSC made funds available through its Participant Fund Program to assist members of the public, Aboriginal groups, and other stakeholders in providing value-added information to the Commission through informed and topic-specific interventions. Based on recommendations from a funding review committee, the CNSC awarded a total of $20,770 in participant funding to representatives who are required to submit a written order intervention and make an oral intervention at today's hearing. The proposed license includes standard license conditions that make reference to licensee programs. Compliance verification criteria such as specific CNSC regulatory documents and CSA standards have been incorporated into the License Condition Handbook. The proposed operating license and associated license condition handbook reflects the continuous nature of safety improvements for the Canadian nuclear substance processing facilities. This concludes my portion of the CNSC staff presentation. I will now pass the presentation back to Dr. Newland.
Thank you, Mr. Rinker. Based on the assessment of SRB's safety performance, CNSC staff conclude that as per Section 24(4) of the Nuclear Safety and Control Act, SRB is qualified to carry on the activities authorized by the license, and in carrying out those activities, SRB has made and will continue to make adequate provision for the protection of the environment, the health, and the safety of persons and the maintenance of national security, and measures required to implement international obligations to which Canada has agreed. Therefore, CNSC staff recommend that the Commission accept CNSC staff's assessment and conclusions. Pursuant to Section 24 of the Nuclear Safety and Control Act, the Commission renews the Nuclear Substance Processing Facility Operating License NSPFOL 1300-2025 for a 10-year period. And pursuant to Section 24 of the NSCA, the Commission accepts the revised financial guarantee set out in Part 2, Section 1.3 of the License Condition Handbook. Thank you. That completes staff's presentation.
Thank you.